Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The bullies didn't know that this weak boy was a kung fu master. In the city of Redwood Springs, a small, peaceful town nestled among the wooded hills of Oregon, lived a teenager named Ethan Brooks. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else, where doors were sometimes left unlocked at night, and where gossip traveled faster than cars. The seasons were marked. Autumn covered the streets with a golden carpet, winter covered the roofs with frost, and summer smelled of sun-baked pine. Ethan was what was called an invisible boy. He always walked with his shoulders slightly hunched, his gaze shifty, a hood often pulled down over his head when the rain fell. At Lincoln High School, he blended into the background like a shadow among the other students. He wasn't the top of the class, nor was he the last. He didn't participate in clubs, didn't eat in the crowded cafeteria, and had very few friends. Most teachers only remembered his name from the roll call. To them, it was just Brooks, Ethan, the quiet boy in the back of the room. But behind that faded face, behind the slightly scratched glasses and the bag always too full of books and sketchbooks, hid a whole world that no one saw. Because Ethan was no ordinary boy. He carried within him a heavy past and an even deeper secret. When Ethan had 6 years, his life was shattered by a crash of metal, broken glass, and silence. A car accident one rainy night had taken both of his parents. He remembered only the blinding light, his mother's scream, and then darkness. When he woke up in the hospital, his world was no longer the same. With no brothers or sisters, no close family nearby, Ethan was entrusted to the only person still alive and willing to take him in, his paternal grandfather, Henry Brooks. Henry lived outside the city, in an old wooden house reached by crossing a path lined with towering pine trees. The house, though austere, exuded wisdom, walls filled with old books, calligraphed parchments, worn rugs on the floor, and above all, an almost sacred silence. Around it, the forest stretched like a living mantle, rustling with wildlife and wind. Henry Brooks was not a man like the others. Many residents of Redwood Springs considered him eccentric hermit, a taciturn old man with strange gestures that he made alone in the courtyard at sunrise. Some said he had lived in China, others that he had been a soldier, or even a monk. Rumors, always rumors. But to Ethan, Henry wasn't crazy or strange. He was a rock. Solid, rooted. A silent, yet constant presence. A man of few words, but whose every gesture seemed to carry a hidden meaning. Henry Brooks was not just a gruff old man with a gray beard and calloused hands. He was, in another life, a recognized expert in traditional martial arts, a man with a rich and secret past, woven with adventures and silence. In the 1960s, when he was only in his 20s, Henry had left America after the Vietnam War, sickened by the gratuitous violence and the inner turmoil it left behind. He was looking for something else. Something that neither guns nor medals could offer him, inner peace. His journey took him first to Japan, where he briefly studied the Shotokan karate, then to Korea, to learn about Taekwondo. But that was still not what he was looking for. It was only when he reached China, after months of traveling, hunger and silence, that he found what would transform his life forever, a Shaolin monastery perched in the foothills of Hunan, hidden in the midst of a forbidden valley. There, among the silent monks, the morning drums and the ancient chants, Henry was accepted as a disciple. He trained there for more than 10 years, in extreme conditions, standing before dawn, running along steep paths barefoot, meditating under waterfalls, punching sandbags until his hands bled. He learned to breathe like the ancients, to move like the wind, to think like the mountain. His body became hard as oak, but his heart softened. When he returned to America, he had nothing left to prove to anyone. He had retired to Redwood Springs, living on the edge of the world, far from noise, far from men. When fate brought his orphan grandson back to him, Henry realized that everything he had learned might not have been for him, but for transmit to him. At the age of 8 years Ethan began training. Not in a shiny gym or in front of mirrors, but in a wild clearing, surrounded by giant pines and moss-covered boulders. No music, no shouting, no medals. Just the earth, the wind, the breathing, and the deep, calm voice of his grandfather. Every morning, even before the sun pierced the trees, Ethan would silently step outside, put on loose-fitting clothes, and join his grandfather outside. There, he learned to anchor himself to the ground, to feel the balance of his weight, to observe the movements of the branches, to listen to his own thoughts and let them pass without following them. Henry did not teach him first to hit, but talk properly. He didn't show him the kicks, but the positions. He didn't say, attack, but wait. Because according to him, it is not the fight that makes the master. It is what he chooses, not to auto fight. As the years passed, Ethan grew up, not as a brutal or arrogant teenager, but as a calm mind in a flexible body. He now knew where to put his feet, how to breathe in fear, how to stay still when everything was pushing him to react. But at school, no one saw this. As Lincoln High School, the universe was completely different. Here, the world belonged to the noisy, the strong, the beautiful. And Bryce Dalton reigned over this jungle like a self-assured lion. Captain of the football team, son of the town mayor, he had everything that teenagers admired: muscles, confidence, popularity. And, as is often the case, he also had the carefree cruelty of those who have never known humiliation. With his two faithful followers, Jared and Tyler, he quickly chooses Ethan as ideal target. Why? Because Ethan never reacted. Because he didn't run away, but he didn't fight back either. He just stood there like a silent rock, without anger or tears. Every day, a new provocation. A tray knocked over in the cafeteria. A locker slammed on his fingers. Papers torn from his notebooks. Insults whispered in his ear: bookworm, asexual. It was Tarlous, everything was there. But Ethan remained marble. He would look down, pick up his books, clean the rice off his jeans, and continue on his way. Some thought he was a coward. Others, that he was mentally fragile. But none of them understood that every insult, every jostle, was for him exercise in patience, a test of inner endurance, a way of putting into practice what Henry kept telling him. He who is not a slave to his emotions is stronger than he who masters 1,000 techniques. But even the calmest water can become a torrent if the rock gives way. And the day was approaching when Ethan would stop suffering, not for revenge, but because the time would be right. Necessary. Inevitable. And Friday afternoon, the skies seemed lower than usual. Heavy clouds smothered the last rays of sunshine, and the campus of Lincoln High School had already emptied itself of its cries, its laughter, its adolescent dramas. Only the library, at the end of hallway C, remained open, silent, peaceful. This was where Ethan had spent his last 2 hours, immersed in an old treatise on Eastern philosophy that most of the students didn't even know existed. When he closed the book, he sighed deeply, picked up his bag, and then left the room. He could have taken the main path, reached the street through the front entrance, like everyone else. But that day, without really thinking, he chose the shortcut behind the science building, a narrow passage that led to the old abandoned sports field. The field was overgrown with tall grass, rusty fences hung in tatters, and the faded lines of the basketball court looked like they belonged to another century. The place had a ghostly feel. And that's where they were waiting for him. Bryce Dalton, in a black sweatshirt and backward cap, was leaning against an old broken basketball post. At his side, his two sidekicks, Jared, with tattooed arms, and Tyler, chewing gum in their mouths, were already sniggering. Well, well. There's our little Zen monk, Bryce said in a honeyed voice. Ethan stopped. He didn't jump. He didn't look away. He closed his eyelids briefly. A heartbeat. A deep breath. He knew that running away would be useless. He also knew that something, that day, was different. Jared, the first one, approached, brutally, snatching his bag from his hands and throwing it further away. So? Are you going to recite your mantras again while your head is blown off? Or are you going to float in the air, little Buddha? Tyler added with a chuckle. But Ethan remained immobile. Then, slowly, he raised his head. And what the three thugs saw in his gaze, it wasn't ne'er fear, nor anger. It was the absolute void, serenity off a man who has nothing to prove, but who knows exactly what he is. A thick silence fell. Even the birds had fallen silent. "I don't want to hurt you," Ethan said, his tone calm and collected, almost gentle. Bryce burst out with a dry laugh. "Did you hear that? He doesn't want to hurt us." And, without warning, he raised his fist. More he could never bring it down. In one fraction of a second, Ethan moved. Not like a panicked teenager. Not like a cornered child. But like water that recedes before hitting, as the leaf that slips between the fingers. He pivoted on his back support, dodged Bryce's fist with disconcerting ease, caught his wrist moving, and used his opponent's momentum to counterbalance. Bryce lost his balance and fell to the ground with a thud, more shocked than injured. Jared, screaming with rage, charged headlong. Bad idea. Ethan shifted a step, twisted his torso slightly, and used Jared's strength against him. His elbow pinned the assailant's shoulder, his foot surreptitiously hooked the back of his leg, and Jared hit the ground like a sandbag. Tyler, who had not yet done anything, took a step back. His chewing gum fell from his mouth. He stammered. "What the hell is this?" He stepped back too quickly, tripped over a branch, and fell without Ethan even touching him. And suddenly, silence returned. Not a sound. Just the panting of three brutes on the ground, and a quiet boy, standing alone, of an almost supernatural tranquility. Bryce, breathless, looked up, stunned. "What was that?" Ethan approached, slowly picked up his bag, and replied, still in a neutral tone. "Do kung fu." Then he turned on his heel, without arrogance, without triumph. As if none of this had affected him. As if this scene had been just a parenthesis in his usual silence. He left the abandoned sports field, leaving behind three teenagers who had just, for the first time, encountered something stronger than themselves, humility. And for Ethan Brooks, this was just the beginning. What Ethan didn't know as he calmly left the old playing field that day was that a pair of curious eyes had observed him from the gymnasium floor. Mia Carter, a senior in her final year of photography, had lingered to capture the light falling on the building's dirty windows. She had noticed the tension in Bryce's posture and Ethan's strange stillness. Something about the scene had awakened her artistic instinct, or perhaps her human premonition. She had discreetly took out his phone, the lens shaky at first, then froze as she saw the scene unfold before her eyes. She'd never seen anyone move like that. Not in real life. Not without special effects. Not a quiet, lonely teenager. Not the boy everyone called the shadow in the hallway. That evening, in her room, after reviewing the footage several times, Mia hesitated. She knew that posting the video would change things. But she also told herself that the world had to see this. So, without adding her name, she posted it under the pseudonym at Ghost in the Gym, with a provocative title. "The nerd everyone mistreats just destroyed 3 bullies, without breaking a sweat." In less than 12 o'clock, the video had crossed the 200,000 views. Then the million. The comments were flying. "Is this a movie? It can't be real. The guy moves like a Shaolin monk, I swear." He gave them a life lesson without raising his voice. "Respect. Who is this guy? We want his name. We want his story." Of the influencers, of the coaches, of the martial arts channels, and even journalists began to search for the identity of the mysterious boy. But Ethan didn't know anything. It wasn't until Monday morning, as he walked through the school gates, that he understood. The whole hall seemed stop-breathing as he entered. Students whispered and nodded at him. Others looked at him with admiration, astonishment, or sudden embarrassment. Several teachers even greeted him, something he had never done in 4 years. When he reached his locker, a group of second-year students approached timidly. You could teach us how to do that?" Ethan looked at them, bewildered. At noon, a local journalist was waiting for him at the gate. Messages had been left for him on social media, offering interviews, internships, and sponsorships. They wanted to invite him to talk shows and offer him contracts. His face appeared in YouTube video montages, TikTok compilations, and articles about the Zen teenager who ended the reign of bullies. But Ethan stayed true to himself. Declined all offers. Ignored the solicitations. Didn't answer anyone. He continued to walk the corridors as he always had, his books under his arm, his earphones in his ears. His only visible change was a deeper peace in his gaze. It was finally the Principal Henderson who invited him into his office. The man, a former history professor, believed in second chances and silent impact. "You've changed the atmosphere of this school more in 2 minutes than I have in 10 years. I'll allow you to use the multipurpose room twice a week. If you want to teach. But it's up to you." Ethan took a night to think. The next day, he posted a small white paper on the notice board. Shaolin Kung Fu Introductory Workshop, Monday and Thursday, 4:30 p.m., multipurpose room. Open to all. No fighting. No insults. No arrogance. It was a culture shock at Lincoln High. The first few days, there were 5 of them. Then 12. Then 25. Boys, girls. Shy ones, popular ones. Former bullies who came as if toto by something back. Bullied students who wanted to regain control of their bodies. Ethan didn't turn anyone away. He taught as his grandfather had taught him, in silence, in simple gestures, in repetitions. He almost never spoke. He guided. He showed. And his students followed, as if drawn by something rare in this noisy world, inner dignity. One rainy Thursday, as the band began warming up in the hushed silence of the room, the door opened. Everyone turned around. And there, standing in the doorway, soaked to the skin, was Bryce Dalton. He wasn't wearing his cap anymore. His sweatshirt seemed too big for him. And for the first time in years he wasn't smiling. He said nothing. He didn't apologize. He stood there, staring at Ethan, as if to silently ask, "Do I still have a place here?" Ethan slowly moves towards him. He doesn't say anything either. He simply opened a wooden cabinet at the back of the room, stepped out a white kimono, the simplest of all, and handed it to him. The gesture was clear. No revenge. No hard feelings. Just a possible path. Bryce took it without a word, nodded, and joined the circle of others, barefoot, his gaze lowered. On that day, a new era began to Lincoln High School. And Ethan Brooks, the invisible teenager, became not a glossy hero, but a master without a throne, a leader without ego, a noiseless guide. On graduation day, the Lincoln High gym was filled with families, teachers, and students dressed in navy blue gowns and square caps. The air vibrated with excitement, but also with nostalgia. When Principal Williams took the stage, all chatter ceased. He paused, looking around the room, then said in a moved voice, "There are students who shine with their grades. Others with their popularity. But sometimes, a student lights up an entire school with their wisdom, their restraint, and their heart." He turned his head towards a calm-faced young man sitting in the front row. "Thank you, Ethan Brooks, for being that light. You transformed our school without violence, without hatred, without shouting. You reminded us that true strength is internal. That the elegance of the gesture is more powerful than the fist." Tears streamed down the cheeks of Mrs. Jenkins, her English teacher. The football coach stood and applauded. Gradually, the entire room rose to its feet in applause. Ethan, flushed with shyness, bowed his head gently, then returned to his seat. That evening, the setting sun bathed the Brooks house in a golden light. The cicadas chirped. Sitting on the old wooden bench in front of the porch, Ethan shared the silence with his grandfather Henry. Their cups of tea steamed gently in their calloused hands. Henry stared at the horizon, his gaze distant, then turned to his grandson. "You're ready," he said calmly. Ethan blinked in surprise. "Ready for what?" "To teach. To pass on what I have given you. You no longer need me to walk your own path." "But I'm not you, Grandpa. I haven't seen everything. I haven't experienced everything. Henry smiled. That rare, genuine smile he only gave at the great truths. You don't need to be me. You're already you, Ethan. And that's enough. The world needs young people like you. Those who can speak without shouting. Stand up for themselves without destroying. Be strong without crushing. Silence fell again. In the sky, the stars appeared one by one. A light breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in the courtyard. Ethan rested his head on his grandfather's shoulder. Do you think I can make a difference, for real? Henry placed a rough but tender hand on the back of her neck. You've already done it. You don't see it yet, but you've planted seeds. And believe me, some of them will grow into trees whose shadow you may never see, but which will protect others. At that moment, Ethan finally understood the meaning of everything his grandfather had taught him. Kung Fu wasn't a weapon. It was a language. An art. A way of being in the world. And under the stars of a peaceful sky, the young master closed his eyes. He was no longer the student. He was now the guide.